It was the most famous scene ever, but was never meant to happen. Pretty Woman has become everyone's favorite romantic comedy. But did you realize that the box office blockbuster was altered significantly before it was released in theaters? You certainly do now. And these delicious behind-the-scenes details will cast a whole new perspective on the touching film. You'll never look at Pretty Woman the same way again after learning the devastating ramifications of that bathtub scene. The movie originally had a grim ending. Pretty Woman is notable for concluding with Richard Gere's Edward overcoming his phobia of heights to climb a fire ladder and kiss Julia Roberts' Vivian. Yet this amorous gesture was the result of some studio interference. The original screenplay's significant darker conclusion seems to have surprised Disney, and you can't blame the House of Mouse. Pretty Woman concluded with Edward shoving Vivian out of his automobile in the previous version. Then Vivian's friend Kat was meant to die from an overdose. You simply can't picture it, can you? Gere had to be convinced to take the role. The first script for Pretty Woman left Gere, may we say, disappointed. According to Cosmopolitan, the actor reportedly said it was a ridiculous little screenplay, and when it got to me, the role was a suit. It was just put someone in the suit. But it was then that director Gary Marshall invited Roberts to step in. Marshall specifically dispatched Roberts to New York to utilize her persuasion skills on her co-star. A post-it note with just 3 words, "Please say yes," was supposedly enough to persuade Gere to take the part. That was really nice, Gere stated after 25 years. Roberts doesn't appear on the Pretty Woman poster. The picture of Roberts and Gere standing back-to-back on the Pretty Woman poster is famous. Although the image seems to be basic, there appears to be a lot of photo manipulation at work. For starters, it isn't even Roberts' genuine physique. For some inexplicable reason, for the poster, an image of Roberts' head was merged onto the torso of her on-set twin. This was all done before Photoshop was even popular. And guess what else? Gere's hair is much darker than it appears in the film. The deleted scenes include a gang fight. Many Pretty Woman sequences that were removed from the final edit have surfaced throughout the years. They include a sweet moment when Edward and Vivian go horseback riding and a lavish steak meal in which Vivian uses ketchup. Most intriguingly, a full-fledged gang brawl almost made it into the film. True, in one film scene, Edward nearly goes into battle with a gang after assisting Vivian in escaping their hands. Yet Vivian isn't overjoyed about being rescued. Instead, she curses Edward and even threatens to beat him up. Maybe it's for the best that it was cut. Pretty Woman originally had a different name. It's difficult to imagine the iconic rom-com being called anything other than Pretty Woman. With its popular soundtrack, the film even recreated Roy Orbison's mid-1960s chart topper, Oh Pretty Woman. Despite this, the film was originally going to be named something much less memorable. So would Pretty Woman have been as successful if it had been published as $3,000? The original title alludes to the money Edward provides Vivian in exchange for her services. Nevertheless, Disney allegedly decided it made the film sound too much like a science fiction film. It's difficult to disagree with that. A sequel will never happen. Considering the film's box office success and cultural effect, you may have anticipated a sequel at some point in time. Yet there's a reason we've never seen what happened next with Edward and Vivian. Each of the 3 primary characters involved vowed only to make a follow-up if they all signed on the dotted line. Gere, Roberts, and filmmaker Marshall did collaborate on the rom-com Runaway Bride in the late 1990s, but it's clear that the 3 didn't think the moment was ever perfect to bring back Pretty Woman for another helping. Moreover, with Marshall's death in 2016, it seems that Edward and Vivian will never return to our screens. Roberts couldn't legally drive. During the production of Pretty Woman, Roberts violated the law by driving about in Edward's cherished Lotus Esprit. The 21-year-old actress had not yet taken her driving test at the time. Yet it didn't stop Roberts from burning some rubber behind the wheel. In fact, the actress outperformed the majority of the Fast and Furious group as she raced around the streets of Los Angeles. She moved so quickly that the video crew was occasionally left behind. These images, according to Roberts, were among the most fun aspects of her time on the film. Vivian's red coat was bought off the street. Although there are many famous costumes in Pretty Woman, the red jacket Vivian wears when Edward spots her across Los Angeles is one of the most iconic. But the costume crew didn't spend weeks creating the eye-catching item. In truth, they just stole it from a member of the general public. True, the colorful jacket was a thrift store find that costume designers saw on a passerby while driving around Los Angeles. The person was then rewarded on the spot by the team for essentially removing the clothes off their back. And the rest, as they say, is history in Hollywood. John Travolta auditioned for the film. John Travolta's career was on the decline in the late 1980s. It's maybe not surprising, however, that the Grease actor was turned down for starring in Pretty Woman. But Travolta wasn't the only big star who tried out for the role. Sylvester Stallone may not have been the most apparent choice for a rom-com lead, but the Rambo actor was allegedly previously considered for the role of Edward. Denzel Washington, Kevin Kline, and Daniel Day-Lewis have all been mentioned as prospective options. Superman, aka Christopher Reeve, was also in the running. Porsche and Ferrari refused to let their cars appear. Edward intended to drive a Ferrari or a Porsche at first, but after learning that Pretty Woman was about a romance with a prostitute, the two automobile companies refused to let the filmmakers use their cars. It proved to be a tremendous error, an enormous blunder. Lotus saw the value of having their Esprit appear in a possible box office hit and granted the Pretty Woman production complete clearance to use the vehicle. And the bet paid off as the Esprit sales surged thrice after the film's debut. Roberts was the victim of a prank. According to a YouTube behind-the-scenes hoax, the tone of the Pretty Woman set was cheerful. On one occasion, Roberts was the victim of a cast and crew's combined mischievous nature. And that all happened during the shooting of the iconic bathtub scene. In the film, Vivian dives in and then returns to say yes to Edward, but after Roberts was underwater, Gere and the rest of the production personnel opted to flee. Of course, the actress saw the irony when she came up for air, but as we'll soon see, this had devastating ramifications for the film. Vivian was nearly played by a teen movie queen. Roberts seems to owe the part that catapulted her to prominence to a 1980s adolescent cinema queen. Initially, filmmaker Marshall envisioned Molly Ringwald as Vivian. Ringwald had previously had box office success with films such as Pretty in Pink and The Breakfast Club. In the end, Ringwald decided that playing a prostitute wasn't for her and turned down Marshall's offer. Since then, the flame-haired actress has stated she regrets passing up such an iconic role. To be honest, the screenplay she read was much grimmer than the one subsequently adapted for the cinema. The necklace had its own armed guard. Pretty Woman was created on a very low budget of $14 million. Therefore, the $250,000 for the renowned jewelry depicted in the film was not covered. The proprietors of the artwork were ultimately convinced to contract it out with one caveat. What's the situation? During the filming, an armed chaperone was required to keep an eye on the object. Vivian was finally able to get her hands on the necklace of her dreams when the makers agreed to her demand. Fortunately for everyone concerned, it seemed that the guard was never obliged to use his firearm. The bathtub scene stripped Roberts' hair. Remember the bathtub gag we discussed earlier? The decision to dye Vivian's hair a bright red created a little issue here. Since Roberts' hair is naturally black, she was compelled to color it before filming started. Nevertheless, color and detergent do not always get along. To keep all those bubbles in the bathtub scene, the team applied a substantial quantity of detergent to the tub. But so much was utilized that Roberts' locks lost all their color. As a result, before shooting could resume, the eventual Oscar winner had to endure another last-minute hair dyeing procedure.